Will the next hot war include hacking the people? I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Dr. P.W. Singer, author of Like War, The Weaponization of Social Media, strategist, and senior fellow at New America Foundation. Nice to have you, Peter. Before we get started, give us a brief summary of your resume and be sure to include your naming as an official mad scientist for the U.S. Army's training and doctor in command.
So besides broadcasting to you live from a hotel in San Antonio, where I'm at right now for a tech conference, I work at a organization called New America. I'm strategist there, but essentially I write books and do consulting on changes in technology, politics, and the like. So I've written books that range from the first to look at the rise of robotics and warfare, to another book that was an explainer on cybersecurity, to Ghost Fleet, which was a novel about what a future war in the 2020s might look like. And then finally, most recently, Like War, which is about how social media changed news, politics, business, and war, but also how news, politics, and business and war changed the internet for the rest of us.
Speaking of Like War, what events motivated you to do the extensive research this book required?
So we started out about 5 years back, and we were tracking all of these different things that seemed to make no sense at the time, but now we know they were the first of a major change. And it was everything from the first so-called Twitter war, where you had an outbreak of violence in the Middle East, but what played out online shaped the airstrike decisions that the generals and politicians were making. Another was the first use by a terrorist group of social media to broadcast what it was doing. And then finally was a policy change that allowed soldiers in Afghanistan to go onto Facebook, and so they could connect with their families in new ways, but they could also friend their adversary on the other side of the battlefield. And so we launched this effort to track just what's going on. And very soon it wove in everything from groups like ISIS to Russian disinformation campaigns, not just in Ukraine, but hitting American politics. And really what we found is two things. One, social media may have begun as a space for fun, then it became big business, but it's also become like a war zone. And anyone who's been online kind of feels this. But the second thing was, it's not just like a war zone, it's actually, we believe, a new mode of conflict itself. If you think of cyber war as hacking the networks, like war is hacking the people on the networks by driving ideas viral through a mix of likes, shares, but also lies. And so you get this very strange outcome where, for example, ISIS's top recruiter is using the same tactics as Taylor Swift, or Russian disinformation warriors are buying digital marketing tools to sabotage elections. And what's important about this is, just like regular old cybersecurity, what plays out on the network doesn't stay there. These online battles are shaping everything from the outcomes of what movies you go to, who you vote for, whether you protest something or not, to literally who wins an election, who wins a physical battle.
You mentioned Taylor Swift, and I thought that was a really interesting thing. How did ISIS copy Taylor Swift's Instagram tactics? And there was also a former World of Warcraft addict that foiled war crimes for 1,000 miles away. Tell us about both of those.
Yeah, and it illustrates something else. As we did this research, we went around not just trying to gather, the big data, the quant side, weave in the history, but we also tried to find the most interesting characters and, what's playing out here. So literally everything from what is the godfather of the internet itself, think about this, to extremist group recruiters, to celebrities, you name it. And those two examples are, kind of powerful ways that you can use people to teach a certain lesson. The Taylor Swift episode links to a guy named Junaid Hussain, who was ISIS's top recruiter. And what both of them realized is that social media allows you to do both one-on-one communication, like the telegraph or the telephone, but also mass broadcasts, one to many, so like the radio. And so what Taylor Swift would do is something that she called Tay-lurking. She gathers intelligence on people online in a way an individual couldn't do before. She reaches down and watches what's going on in her fans' personal lives. And then she will communicate with them. She'll congratulate someone on passing a driver's license exam. She'll console someone who broke up with her boyfriend. And, she acts just like their friend. She is their friend in the new meaning of it, but she's doing it in full knowledge that the whole world is watching. And so it's this very powerful way of both winning followers, but also driving them to what she wants, which is to sell music albums. And it's part of how Taylor Swift became one of the richest self-made women out there in the world today. Junaid Hussain, ISIS top recruiter, did the same exact thing, but for him, it was persuading people to join ISIS, travel to Syria, or actually to carry out a certain number of terrorist attacks inside the United States. The World of Warcraft example of this is another play about one of the rules that we found of what's happening in this new world online, but also offline, is there's no more secrets, or kind of more technically, as a CIA officer put it to us, all secrets now come with a half-life. And so this character is an individual who was a stay-at-home dad. He'd lost his job. He was spending, he thought, too much time playing World of Warcraft and the like. And so he decided to use that towards something better. And so he began to track war crimes, real world war crimes. And he became one of the world's leading sources of information about everything from chemical weapons attacks in Syria to his team is the one that documented not just that Russia shot down the airliner over Ukraine a couple years ago, but they even identified the individual Russian soldiers that pulled the trigger solely off of what was on social media. So these people at home, these new kind of online warriors, were gathering and sharing information that the CIA couldn't have done just a couple years ago. But it's a great illustration, that episode, of one of the other rules is the truth is out there, like, the X-Files would have taught us. However, there's a second rule. It can be buried underneath a sea of lies. And that's what we've seen in everything from teenage behavior to gangs to domestic politics to Russia's information attacks. So that example of him documenting that Russia shot down the airliner, Russia's response to it was to push out over 14 different competing theories online, some of them totally contradictory, but to drive those viral so that the truth was kind of lost in all the noise, which anyone who's seen what happened in American politics can go, oh yeah, that's kind of familiar.
Weakening the morale of an opponent is a military tactic with ancient roots. So what role then do ordinary citizens play in accomplishing that goal via social media today?
This space is a great example of one of the parallel lessons that we've seen in everything from public health to cybersecurity. There's a role for government, there's a role for business, but there's a role for each and every one of us. And the role that we play as individual crosses between knowing what's going on, but also behaving in the right way, having a sense of responsibility. So, for example, if we're thinking about regular old cybersecurity, and I love the way, we're talking about something that's only been around about a generation, but, if we're thinking about the hacking of networks, we would never say, well, the military created Cyber Command, so that means there's nothing for a private business to do. Your mom doesn't need to have a good password for her bank account. No, we'd say we need each and one of these things. It's the same thing when we think about these influence operations that, again, are targeting nations, but they're also targeting us as individuals. And in both of these spaces, they take advantage of ignorance. So, for example, over 60% of social media users don't know how the companies make money. So they don't realize they're the one providing the data. That's why it's free. They don't just have the inability to distinguish between real and fake news. They can't distinguish between an ad and actual content. They don't understand how where the news in their feed comes from. They don't understand how algorithms are driving it. And so all of the activities take advantage of that. But there's also this aspect of personal responsibility. If we think about the parallel of public health, I teach my kids, cover your mouth when you cough. Now, that does nothing to protect them. It's all about them having the responsibility to protect those around them. Think about the online version of this. We have, most of us, no problem with someone doing the equivalent online of coughing in our face, of spreading a false message, of spreading, we all have that friend or coworker or family member who, pushes nonsense conspiracy theory, and we just kind of shrug it off. Well, it's the online equivalent of them coughing in our face, or even worse, we're the ones that do it. We don't like to admit it, but over 60% of us push out articles online without ever reading the content of the article. When we were tracking the what drove something viral, and in particular false information, it was not the origin of the information. It was not the content of the information. The most important thing was whether someone in your network, a friend or family member, was the one who pushed it. So it puts it back on us to have that kind of sense of responsibility. But again, this circles back up to the level of corporate responsibility and governmental responsibility. So just like in hygiene, where I may teach my kids it, they also learn it at school, or our businesses have those little squirters that put out things to wash our hands with. We need the same thing online, and everything from education system teaching digital literacy, to imagine a world where social media platforms, instead of denying all the bad stuff that's gone on the networks, and the scale is much bigger than people want to deal with. For example, over half the American public, over 146 million Americans, unknowingly were exposed to Russian propaganda on Facebook during the 2016 election. During Brexit, 1/3 of the online conversation was from inauthentic voices. So the scale is huge, but imagine a world where instead of denying the scale, they were being proactive, whether it's bumping offline toxic actors, or pushing up pop-ups that provided education. Hey, you might be exposed to bad things online. Here's how you avoid it. Here's what you can do to protect yourself. We've done that increasingly in the realm of cybersecurity. For example, some tech platforms will push up things like, reminders about two-factor. Have you given the cell phone for another way to contact you? They don't have that on how to protect yourself from these online influence campaigns that arguably are causing more harm to society, to individuals, but they're also increasingly targeting corporations themselves.
We certainly need to increase our awareness of where this content's coming from before we share it with our friends and family. Thanks for those ideas and suggestions. Dr. P.W. Singer, author of Like War, The Weaponization of Social Media. He's also the strategist and senior fellow at New American Foundation. If somebody wants to connect with you, Dr. Singer, what's the best way they can do that?
So website, PW Singer has all the different, links to articles and books. The Like War book is available on different, all the corporate book selling sites, and also at likewarbook.com.
All right. Well, thanks again. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or go to my website, tonyahall.net. I've got links to all my social sites. Thanks for watching.